I want to keep this as efficient as possible and sort of walk through why we're holding this, why this had to happen in the month of July. I have Max here who has a lot of data and information from the Borough President's Office. But I think we can basically get started, and as people join, we can explain why we're all here. Thanks for taking time out in July. Just for people who don't know, we did vote on it, but the CB7 no longer has meetings in July because of the bylaws that were passed. So Susan Schwartz is not able to be on this call tonight, but I wanted to relay that and again reiterate that I think when we last stated that there are 3 absences on the board, that is not part of what the bylaws indicate. I had hoped to share the bylaws around for you all to read before this call, but they are up on the website. My understanding is the approved bylaws are on the website, so you should all take a look at them if you have questions about the absence policy. But I do think it drives some of the thinking tonight for what we're going to propose. So basically, we are calling this meeting to order for one main reason, which is that we need to have something to vote on for an emergency full board meeting on Thursday, which will be to address one single item, which is to have a vote on the books about the borough president's resolution that came before us to vote on. We need to have that in order to recognizing that the state law, and Max, stop me if I'm misspeaking on this, but that the state open meetings law changes, we believe, on July 25th. So for the sake of making sure we have something on the books, we've called a meeting tonight, and we must do a full board meeting on Thursday to have a full board vote on whatever comes out of this task force discussion. So that's why these meetings have been organized. And we see this as 2 options. Option number 1 is that the task force advances the borough president resolution as it is. So the resolution you guys have seen for at least a week now, but that Max recirculated today for an up or down vote at full board. So we can just say, let's take it to a full board special meeting on Thursday, task force, and let's discuss it there. Or we make some tweaks tonight to what that is. We vote on it tonight as a revised resolution, and we send that to the full board emergency meeting on Thursday. So given the folks who are on this call, I'd like to just open it up for that reason, unless Max, if there are any other details or clarifications, maybe if you'd like to mention how the other boards and other community boards have addressed this or voted on this based on your conversations at district cabinet and borough board.
Sure. So everything you said was pretty much spot on, and that's correct. We only have until the 25th to pass something, unless, of course, the mayor or the governor extends, which they may or may not do. At this point, we're still, the most recent update I have is 10 of the 12 community boards have passed this language or a very similar draft. The only difference being one labeling it an interim measure of sort, and just kind of kicking the can down the road, so to speak. And I think that's the update I have.
Great. I think with that in mind, maybe we can, for those of you who are on the call, and I don't know how many are actual task force members or people who are just joining because they want to contribute tonight. As I mentioned earlier, we have about 75 minutes to come up with something tonight that will go before the full board, something that we have spent hours and hours discussing in recent months. And I think we want to, my thought was to start with what the borough president has sent us and work backward from that. So people have come to us with several constructive suggestions. I guess my first question for the task force is, does anyone feel as though we should just have an up or down vote Thursday night of the full board, whether we like the borough president's resolution or not, vote on that and be done with it, which would leave the task force a longer time to determine how we're going to operate? And Does anyone, it doesn't sound like that's what people want to do. I just wanted to make sure that we could go into the sort of tweaking of what the borough president's resolution is to align more closely with what I think the task force and what the board has been talking about in recent months, so that we can then present it to the full board on Thursday for a vote. And that's how we'll operate until further notice. So
I like the word tweaking, and I don't want to open the option of reworking the proposal. So I like the word tweaking it, and then we put it in. We put a lot of thought into this, and then we put it into the board for a vote. Just picking up a few points here and there, maybe syntax and stuff, nothing substantial, because I think we've done the substantial work.
So there's nothing substantial to the resolution that you see from the borough president's office you would want to change.
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. So anyone else, we can open this up for a comment. And Max, I don't know if you're in front of your laptop, but if you can help me just sort of monitor people with their hands raised, I want to pull up what we had. Two people who couldn't be here tonight who did offer comments, actually 3 people, and I wanted to make sure those were relayed. The first came in from Jay, which was in paragraph 3A, the word should change to must. The statute mandates that members be physically present unless able to be present due to extraordinary circumstances. Then he had another, I think, comment about paragraph 3B, that it should be made clear that illness and caregiving responsibilities must also be unexpected to satisfy the extraordinary circumstances requirement. And then number 3 said the last sentence he thought was unnecessary, since only the state can suspend the open meetings law due to an emergency, and unless it specifically does so, the law remains in effect, which I think is a legalese thing, which any lawyers on the call hopefully can tell me what I'm missing there. But the first 2 points, I think, are ones that sort of have been addressed and raised at our task force meetings that we may want to include in how we revise this and send it to the full board. So is there anyone else who has a question?
Yeah.
Just
Can I ask?
Okay, Melissa, thanks.
Sorry, I have my virtual hand up, but I think you can't see them. So the other boards passed the resolution like exactly as it came from the VP's office, and is that with like the assumption that they're going to pass a follow-up resolution that is different? Or I guess I'm just wondering how other boards are thinking about it relative to how we are.
Sure, most passed it word for word. That's correct. Again, not all. And as I said, one, actually my old board, I think passed it with some caveat that it's just an interim measure to just kick the can down the road. And I believe one other board did something which I think is technically an option and in line with the tweaking that was suggested, where it's then there's a line added where it's just then deferred to the committee level, and then committees individually will have their ability to craft more specific language.
So other folks are also thinking of making like more specific resolutions with
Yes.
different language.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but I think what we're concerned about is passing this just as like a blanket statement. I think there needs to be a sentence or two based on what we're hearing from the task force that says that Community Board 7 would like to have the right for its committees and possibly even its full board to decide the specifics of this. I think what we want to do is what we had talked about, and I think even passed at the full board last month, which is we want to have the option of virtual meetings for people. We don't want that to go away. We know for the community, we want to absolutely make sure we support the community being able to attend virtually any meeting that we do, whether it's committee or a full board meeting. I'm sorry. Oh. And then we wanted to just make sure that rather than going through in gross detail, as everyone knows, things with COVID are changing by the minute, just really try to empower the community board at the each board level to continue the discussions, but to not have something handed down that after July 25th, we automatically need to have a policy in place to be meeting in person all the time. And I think that's what, again, what we're trying to do is, support, I guess, not support the resolution, but support the fact that we want virtual meetings to continue in some way.
Okay. Helpful. Thank you.
And then leave up to the community boards, each, in my opinion, each individual community board, but I don't know, Max, when you said that some of the individual boards had made tweaks or comments, like, were those just that they wanted the right to do that? They agreed to have the right to do that?
That's right, that they were going to then leave it up to the individual committees to craft specific language. So let's just say there was a Parks Committee and a BCI committee. They could have different looking rules, and that would be up to the co-chairs and I guess the committee members of each committee. And I think that was just a line that was added in towards the end of some of them. And then, as I said, the other one was just saying, hey, this is an interim measure. We're just passing this because we need to pass it because at some point the governor and the mayor are going to stop extending. And so we're just going to pass this. But this, I think, again, it's not necessarily the be all end all. It's let's pass this so then we're just legally allowed to meet hybridly. And then we can figure out the rest.
So I guess that's the first item on the table, and this can be a very short meeting if that's what we want to do, is do exactly what the other, these other couple of boards have done, is include a sentence that basically says, we want to make sure that we allow the opportunity for hybrid meetings, and we're passing this now, but we want to empower our board, our board and our committee chairs to be able to set their own rules. Sort of something with drafting some sort of language to that effect.
Here, here.
What you said, Elizabeth, I think that we should go down that road. The only comment that I had was about the quorum, when it says that if you're virtual, that you wouldn't be counted as quorum. My only question is, what if there's not enough in-person attendees? So that's something that we may have to look at in the future, because that might happen.
100%. And I also think we could end up having, we've talked about this at our task force meetings, but we could end up having the same 26 people who show up in person every single month. And then there are 24 people who never show up in person at all. And there probably are 26 people on our board right now who would do that and show up every month. We're only meeting 10. One thing I know from the bylaws is that we are only meeting 10 times a year for full board and not 11. So there are a lot of people who I think would probably, do that. And so, I think this begs the question of how do we determine, both at the committee level and at the full board level, that there's equity in who comes to a meeting and who doesn't, and what those, and we've talked about this for months. There's no easy answers to it, but I think trying to force something into like the borough president's resolution where we just rubber stamp what they're doing, I think we have to have some latitude to be able to determine as CB7 what we think is best. I don't think that will get resolved tonight. So our thought was just, signing on to the resolution with the disclaimer that Community Board 7 wants to have the latitude to be able to determine how and when our members meet. I think how the public meets is pretty understood, that we all agree that we want to present them with as many options as possible for being able to attend virtually, but they're not the ones who are voting. And I think where it becomes very complicated is thinking about who gets the right to vote of the 50 members of the board. If you're in person or if you're not in person, And I don't think that's something that the borough president's office, I don't think it's been fleshed out in this resolution. That's my personal opinion, not the opinion of the task force. But I think that we need to have more time to contribute to that before we officially sign on to any rules that the borough president's office hands down. Does that seem like?
I'm sorry I'm not on screen, but Elizabeth, I don't know if you can tell, but there are quite a number of us with our hands up.
Yep. So I'm going to Arena. I'll go to you next, and then to
No,
the other.
I'm actually not next. It's Mark, Diller, Ken, and Polly.
Well, okay. Well, I don't see it in the same way you do. I just see hands that are up, and I'm also trying to.
In terms of how long they've had their hands up, so I don't mind going last. It wasn't clear to me that you could see the hands, the raised hands.
No, I can see them. I can see them. I was just looking through. I was trying to go through all of the most recent copies of comments that have come into me today about this at the same time that I'm trying to run the meeting. So appreciate your patience. So I guess was it Ken first? Was it Mark first? Mark, go ahead.
All right, thanks. First thing that I was going to mention, I guess Max has beaten me to it, which is that our colleague Sonia Garcia is with us, and she was in attendees, but I'm grateful that he's promoted her, so thank you for that. The last meeting that I attended of this task force, there was seemed to be a consensus that the nitty-gritty of who decides whether a person may attend remotely and vote remotely, and what definitions of extraordinary circumstances would apply to that decision-making would be the subject of future discussions, and that the purpose of that meeting, and as I understand it now, this meeting would be simply to preserve the right to have hybrid meetings. There was I expressed, and I believe others as well, expressed concern with the borough president's resolution because it had that doctor's note Michigas in it. And as I've seen the draft that's been circulated by Max, that has been deleted. Perhaps more has been deleted from that item C than needs to be, because I think the vulnerability acknowledgement is a good one. Just the doctor's note was my objection. But I would be comfortable with I'll call it a placekeeper resolution along the lines of the borough president's resolution, to be adopted by us tonight and by full board on Thursday, if that is the will of the task force and the committee and the board. I do think that we should have a more complete statement of who decides, and I put forward to Elizabeth and others my thoughts on who should decide whether somebody gets to participate and vote remotely, because I think Elizabeth's right. It shouldn't be the same 26 people showing up every month and the same 24 getting a pass. With the possible exception of if a person has a legitimate disability, physical disability, that might be a separate conversation. But again, that's for future reference. With respect to the quorum part, and I think it was Polly who asked that, technically speaking, a person who participates remotely is not part of the quorum because the quorum must be in person. That's statutory. There's nothing we can do about that. The only tweak that I would suggest with respect to this resolution on that score is to insert a parenthetical after it says that the person doesn't qualify as part of the quorum, paren, but still may vote, close paren, just to make abundantly clear that you're not simply phoning in to hear, but you're participating in every way, provided that you're entitled to participate remotely. And I think that's all I've got for right now. So I would move that as a resolution when the time comes. Thanks.
Okay, so Mark, you're basically in support of us taking the borough president's resolution with the statements you mentioned, including those in with the caveats, and moving that to Thursday for a full board vote.
Including what you've already very ably elucidated, which is having a statement in there somewhere that says that this is subject to further revision based on, yeah. So as long as that plus the clarification on vulnerability and the ability to vote, I can live with this for now, I guess is the best way to say that.
Yeah, and
Thank
we're really
you.
not trying to extend this task force. We want it to have, I know task forces have a start date and an end date, and I wish COVID had a start date and an end date too, but it doesn't. So I think it's really important that we do what we need to do to make sure we've made our statement as Community Board 7 before July 25th, which we're going to do on Thursday, and then we continue to meet as a task force to the extent that people still tolerate me and everyone else having these discussions, so that we can try to push the borough president and sort of our board in a direction that we think it should go to ensure, you know, fairness for everyone, given the constraints that are constantly evolving. Ken, I know you're next and your hand has been up. I think you're the one who is next.
I think so. Yeah, I agree with Mark. I was hoping, or I thought, that we'd be able to do the more than tweaks. I think what's needed are more than tweaks, because as he says, we need a mechanism for how to decide who gets excused, under what circumstances, and have more detailed guidance on that. But I can definitely go along with something for Thursday, because there's a limited amount we can do in the next hour. Just a couple of suggestions along the lines of tweaks. In addition to what Mark just said, I agree on the vulnerability, restoring that, but not the doctor's note. In 4B of the borough president's recommendation, where it says, in other words, they must be continually visible on video with identification. That seems like there's now a double standard between video and in person, because obviously we can take bathroom breaks in person, and Lord knows we have to do it on video too. So I think maybe maybe that's not necessary, the continually. Maybe mostly or predominantly, or maybe even set a time limit like 10 minutes or something. But I think that's a little extreme. So I would make that recommendation. And was there one other thing? Oh, at the end under F, 4F, it says the minutes must identify which members of the board participated virtually and set forth the reason justifying such attendance. I think that's probably might be a violation of HIPAA and privacy rules, and I'm not sure that's necessary. So I would recommend taking that up.
Yeah, we can look into the HIPAA rule, and I think on your second point, you know, again, we've talked about this a lot at the task force meetings. We absolutely care about, you know, for those people who are dialing in, I say dialing in, but zooming into a meeting, it's really hard, you know, when we're all at Road of Shalom or at, you know, Lincoln Center or at one of our meetings, we have a camera that live streams our meetings, but when people get up to go get a coffee or get water, if it's hot out, or if they get something, people go in and off camera all the time. And I personally, again, think, and I think the task force generally believes that if you're coming in virtually, you're expected to pay attention, you're expected to be present. But I think there are some concerns that have been raised about how we police people when they're at home, if they have a child care issue, if they have something that's going on, do they have to physically go with their child into, you know, you know, there are all sorts of issues that have been raised with this that, again, I think the borough president's office needs to have a little bit more thorough set of guidelines for us before we can fully support that piece. And I think the task force shares, Ken, those concerns that you have about how that is going to be done. It's sort of like the minute you offer people a virtual option, it's like, how do you come into there? You're having effectively 50 independent meetings because you're in each person's apartment. or 24, potentially 24 independent meetings. So how do you manage that versus what's happening with the 26 people who are in a central location in person? And we don't have a lot of guidance yet, and that's what the task force is trying to provide some guidance on for the borough president's office. So great points all around. And on the HIPAA thing, also, I think we can look into. Max, if you could help me take a note of that, we'll follow up, because I do think the privacy issues are also important, but we're in a new world now, so we've got to adjust to a little bit of things. So I think I saw Arena, your hand is still up, so I know you probably have some questions. I saw Beverly, but I'm not screening maybe across to everyone if there are others.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Sorry, I'm not on screen. I have a couple of questions and suggestions. Firstly, I'd like to say that I agree with Mark and Ken. I think we should move forward with the borough president's language with the caveats, and I'm glad Ken raised the issue around sharing specific information about in the minutes, a public document that has to be made public, that people will have access to, about the reason people are not attending, which, to Ken's point, could include personal information, health-wise or others. So I'm a little concerned about the need to put that explanation in public minutes. I wonder whether in the document we could just maybe parenthetically reference that board members or public members must adhere to COVID guidelines as stated by the venue. I just think it's just really important to note that we will have to follow COVID guideline for the different venues that we host our meetings, and we might want to just reference that in the document. Also, I wonder, and we don't have to resolve this today, but I wonder whether we would at any point want to, I don't know if a percentage of meetings in person, but I guess I struggle with the fact that if board members don't have to attend any meetings in person, it just seems like, okay, so, and I'm, present company excluded, but like, I could just go to, my second home and, somewhere and just spend the rest of my life there, but I'm representing a community and I'm not really living in the community. So how, would that just be like, you never have to come to an in-person meeting ever again as a member of community board 7? I'm a little concerned about that. So it doesn't have to be resolved now, but it seems to me that there should be a percentage of meetings that we should try to attend, whether it's a committee or a full board in a given year. I don't know what it is, arbitrarily 30% of the meetings, 25%, but to say that you're on a community board and you never have to attend any in-person meetings, I just feel like if you make a commitment to serve on a community board, there's a certain obligation that comes with that, and that's getting to know your fellow board members and members of the public and being present at least for a percentage of those meetings. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Arena. And I think that's shared by, I think the majority of the task force and probably the majority of the board. Again, I think one of the things that's come out of our task force meetings and has come out of, I think what the borough president is trying to do, even if it's not articulated as artfully as I would have liked, to be honest, is I think coming out of COVID, there is this opportunity now with Zoom to include more people from the community, right? From the community. It's different from the 50 board members, but for the community, I think we are all in agreement that we want to democratize that as much as possible. We want as many people who can either physically come to a meeting or be there to listen in on Zoom and participate. They're not voting members. They're there to listen. They're hearing about the things that are going on in the neighborhood. that's sort of been like a silver lining in all of the gloom and doom of what's happened with the tragedy that's been COVID. Where it gets thorny is exactly what you're saying, which is how you determine who and when from a given community board can show up and should show up for a full board meeting or even for a committee meeting. And that is something we are not going to resolve tonight. But it is hopefully something that we can provide some leadership on, and we've been doing it, and all of your contributions have been incredibly valuable to date. But that we send some of these recommendations after we put this through and vote on it on Thursday, so that the borough president's office sort of knows that this is not, these are not easy questions, and they're not things that are going to get solved. And we want to make sure that we do things in an equitable way, as you have said, very artfully. So Beverly, I think I see your hand next, Sonia and Doug, and forgive me if I've missed anyone in between.
Yeah, a couple things. I'm in accord with the tweaks that have been articulated so far. And I think that would be helpful to customize this a little bit. I think the issue about including in the minutes reasons for virtual attendance, my reading of the statute was a little while ago, but there is definitely something in the statute that aligns with this. And I would suggest that if we're a little concerned with the language in the draft from the borough presidents, we go back to the actual text of the law and deal with that. I think you could get away with essentially a set of fairly general statements as to different reasons. It can be medical, period. It could be family issue, period. Whatever it is, you could do it in a set of fairly generalized categories that would not necessarily mean that we're invading anyone's privacy. I think in terms of the who gets to decide and the fairness of who attends in person and who persistently may not, I think that's going to fall to our chairs of the committees. And we really need a little bit of experience with it to know what, in fact, are the pressure points. I think kicking the can down the road there is the right thing to do. I foresee a situation where our co-chairs essentially assume some of the responsibilities of a legislative whip, where they have to actually reach out and begin to encourage certain members to ensure we have a quorum as necessary. But I think that's all something we don't know yet how it will play out. And so if we get a month or two of experience with that, I think it's the right thing to do. That's it.
Thank you, Beverly. Those are great points.
And
Sonia,
Elizabeth, I just want to jump in and say,
Yeah,
Beverly is
of course.
correct. That is in the statute, the element of it requiring us to put it in the minutes. I just want to clarify, she's correct there.
Yeah. So again, I think we all wish that this had been something we had more consultation with before, but that's part of the state mandate, right, Max?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. But
Okay.
to Beverly's point, we can kind of take it in our own way. And I think it's good.
Exactly. So I'm going to let those who haven't spoken yet. I see Sonia, I see Doug, and then Mark, I see you again. So, and then I think we're all sort of leaning, hopefully going in the same direction on this. And I would just propose as a next step, what Max and I need to do is we're recording this meeting so that we don't have to take handwritten notes, but that we can go back and review this meeting and include these sort of tweaks to what we present, send it to the task force and to all of you, hopefully in the next 24 hours, unless there are any major changes, we vote on it Thursday night. So Sonia, over to you. Sonia, are you there?
Do you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Sonia.
Good evening. I'm sorry. Okay, I was agreeing with Beverly about the we don't have to say we don't have to be very specific. HIPAA should never even, I don't even think we need to address HIPAA issues in our minutes at all. HIPAA is only for health. And that's basically in a health facility. We don't have to be that specific in our minutes. But we could say, for like Beverly just said. The other thing that I was questioning too, do you not think that when you have your meetings virtually, that the meeting goes longer or has the capacity to go longer because if you were at a facility or at a hosting facility, we would have to wrap things up in some way faster or more succinctly than we did, let's say, for that last meeting that I attended.
Yeah, I mean, Sonia, those are great points. Look, I think board business is board business, and having been a board chair before COVID, when we did not have Zoom and did not have the opportunity to do meetings virtually, I have to say, I think both Mark and Stephen have done a great job of trying to run those meetings as chairs as efficiently as possible. But it's a good point, and I do think even when it comes to elected officials coming and speaking for a long time, it all comes down to meeting management. And I think the chair really needs to take on that responsibility, whether it's in person or virtual, to make sure that the 50 board members, they know that they're giving up, 3 or 4 hours, on a given Tuesday night, the first Tuesday of most months of the year. And they put that on their calendars, and it's up to the board chair. And if the board chair doesn't do that job in the way that the 50 board members like, they can vote for somebody else the next time around, is my feeling on that, whether it's virtual or in person. But yes, the meeting management piece, I don't think that having Zoom calls necessarily makes a meeting longer. But it really just comes down to the chair running the meeting and figuring out ways to make them more efficient. So
I mean, this last meeting was exceptional. It was
Right.
an exceptional case, but I'm just saying in general, I remember, I think once when we were voting for the Amsterdam Avenue,
Yes, the bike lane.
bus lane, the bike lane.
Yeah.
We had to leave at a certain time.
Right. And that's again, something that's,
Yeah.
again, comes down to, the people who are running the meeting, and we do our best to try to run them, but we also want to maximize participation. And again, I think the wonderful thing about Zoom, provided that it can be used and everyone can access it, and I'm very disappointed that not everyone in our community can access the internet and can access our meetings in a democratized way. I think it's gotten better during COVID and the years past. But I do think that allowing members of the public to be able to participate in a way that they couldn't actually makes things more efficient. And there's certainly a lot of room for us to grow in this new environment, knowing that that's going to be an option for us. So those are really, really great points. And thank you. Doug, over to you.
Right. So yeah, just to the last point, yeah, if we have a curfew from a venue that we're renting, clearly there's a finite amount of time we have, and on Zoom we can go on. But I do agree it's a matter of meeting management, and that's sort of a subject matter that we can even take up, along the way. And so it seems to me, to oversimplify things, in case anyone isn't 100% clear on this, but I think we all are. If we do not vote to pass some semblance of a resolution approving the Manhattan Borough President's resolution, then we cannot meet anything but in person after the 25th. So this is, to me, a no-brainer. We must pass a resolution so we have options. And I do believe in the kick the can down the road, although I'm not in favor of procrastination, but this is not procrastinating. This is giving us adequate time in the future to go over a lot of the very valuable tweaks that were brought up today. And we just don't have enough time today to do this. So I'm in favor of of kicking the can down and basically voting on something and leaving some open points in our resolution that this is to be discussed further and to be defined further. The topic of the public, I think that's already a done deal. The public must have the ability to view all meetings, and the minutes have to be published, and they're going to be memorialized on YouTube. So that's a done deal. That's not even up for discussion. What we're talking about is voting members, what constitutes a quorum, and what constitutes, an exception to, anyone's excuse. And that's exactly what we need to flesh out. So, simply put, I just think we absolutely have to vote to approve in some semblance with some caveats and kick that can down the proverbial road, but make sure that we do it and we give a lot of attention to the valuable things. And yes, things are changing by the minute with the variants. I've been watching the news this morning, and different this morning than it was last night. So I'm sure they're going to be things that we're going to have to really consider. Thank you.
100%. Thank you, Doug. Those are great points. So I think we're all coalescing, which is great. I appreciate all your patience over these months. Mark, I think you are the last comment until we sort of close this out, and I have a road ahead that we can briefly talk about. Then we can all, hopefully those of you who are in the city, we can all go out and enjoy Manhattan Henge for a little bit. It's a beautiful night here. So
great point, and thank you. Bev beat me to it with respect to the, so as Max correctly pointed out, the statute requires saying who participated remotely. It doesn't require why, but I think Bev has hit the nail on the head, simply saying, caregiver issues or medical issues, and then we don't have, that's one fewer tweak that we need to make. I would propose one additional tweak based on what I've been hearing this evening, which I'm drawing more or less from the comments that I've submitted in previous meetings, which is to say that in the same paragraph, perhaps, where we say something to the effect that we expect to continue to define and set procedures for the implementation of the hybrid options that we are here in adopting in this resolution, I think that we should also, or could, add a sentence that says, absent these extraordinary circumstances identified above, all CB7 members are expected to attend all full board, committee, and task force meetings in person. So that, I think, addresses the concern that was raised by some folks. I think Irena may have been one of them. Forgive me if I'm not catching it correctly, that there could be a contingent of us who are recidivist non-attendees. I don't know if that helps or hurts, or is that better left to the subsequent discussions that we are signing up to have? But that's one way you could handle that.
I personally, Mark, agree with you on that, and I think that would be a good way to address it. I also know we need to get something passed on Thursday, and we have I think a preservation meeting on Thursday at 6:30, and we're meeting at 5:30. So we don't have a lot of time to.
Preservation was moved a week, so you don't have that. But
okay.
But we are still meeting at 5:30 apparently.
Oh, well, okay. I was hoping it was still at 6:30. Made our lives a lot easier, but that's okay. That's fine. But I think what
I'm happy to withdraw it to the future discussion.
No, look, I think it's an important thing that I think it's an important point to put in. I think we've agreed as a task force that the starting point for most members of the board, if we didn't have COVID, if we were all living in a bubble in a perfect world, would be that we would all be attending meetings in person. And we are working to make accommodations for reasons why we can no longer do that. But that, when you join Community Board 7, in most cases, the default is you join a meeting in person. And there are a whole host of reasons that we now know why you may not be able to do that. And we have a whole set of things from the borough president's office in his resolution that explain what's needed to host a meeting and have a quorum for doing so. But I do think that point, the way you've articulated it is really good. And I'm glad we're recording this meeting because I'm going to go back and listen to it so we can incorporate it as one of the tweaks. I see Melissa, you're on again, and then Doug, if your hand is still up for another point. If there's anyone else, let me know. Otherwise, we'll try to wrap by 7:30, 7:40.
Yeah, I would ask that we not incorporate that addition from Mark and that be sort of put into the kicking the can down the road discussion, because I have some very different viewpoints on, like, I think there's a need for flexibility, like we've adapted work for flexibility, like there's some need for that, and I feel like there's not really a valuing of all reasons to not be at a meeting at the same level. So I just, for simplicity's purposes and getting this done and over the hump before this deadline we're up against, I'd ask that we not start putting in language about like what's a valid reason and what's not.
I'm happy to keep less is more. I do want to say though, I'd like to ask you to come up with what you think, if somebody joins a community board, what their actual requirement for service is.
Sure.
Is it virtual meetings in perpetuity, or is it them? How many times should a person have to do something actually in an in-person setting? I mean, that's what we've been wrestling with on this task force for months now, and there's no easy answer. But I think we are all in agreement. There, again, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but I think I would like to hear what your solutions are. I agree. I think living arrangements and sort of how hybrid work is done is a little different from a volunteer board. The MTA, we've talked about this at our meetings in the past. The MTA, other public service organizations are still going back. They actually aren't hybrid. They're required to be in person once a month. So if you have a better solution, we'd love to hear about it. All right, so who's next? Doug, do you have a final comment?
I forgot to mention something real quick. Something that Max brought up regarding other boards and passing a resolution regarding potentially different attendance and participation policies per committee. My knee-jerk reaction to that is that might be a mess. Now, because I don't personally have a problem with perhaps one set of policy for full board and for all committees. But if we end up having different policies for different committees, what you're going to have are participants that may sign on with a particular committee because their policy is more lenient or whatever. So that scares me. But I don't, again, if we're going to two buckets, full board and all committees, but to have different rules for different committees, I could see being very disorganized. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think something hopefully in September, if this goes through and we still have some latitude to help shape how these meetings take place. I agree. I mean, look, the whole nature of how we work has changed. Melissa's 100% right in that. That as somebody who in your professional life, Doug, is dealing with real estate that is, people are here and there and everywhere. I think the question for a community board is like, what does it mean to be a member of a community board? Like, what does it mean? Like, maybe people can be virtual a lot of the time. Maybe they can't be. But I don't think that's something that by setting sort of hard and fast rules for something in August with the borough president resolution, I think we need to add some of these tweaks so it gets them thinking. And then we continue to have our discussions, hopefully bring in the borough president, hopefully figure out. And I think what your point about having a standard for all committees is a really good one, that it does make it, the onus then becomes Max, Ashley, Jesse, like on you to handle attendance, which is going to be a nightmare. I mean, for all of you signed on to these jobs, and it's already going to be hard enough to figure out what a quorum is to get meetings and who's in person and who's not and collect all that information. Doing it committee by committee is going to be an added element of stuff that you would probably not want to spend your brains doing during a given day, and you just want to get things done for the neighborhood. So those are really good points. So I think what we'll do in the last few minutes, unless there are any other questions, please let me know. I don't want to exclude anyone. I'm doing my best here with my is really to present something on Thursday. We are going to do a full board meeting. Please tell your fellow Community Board 7 members, we are going to keep it brief. I feel like I should say we do have a preservation meeting at 6:30, just so we keep our meeting to 1 hour or less. But that we go through this, we add the couple of tweaks that I think have come out of this conversation, basically present the resolution as it stands. We take an up or down vote amongst the full board, and we send that to the borough president's office. We know there are going to be changes, July 25th. We want to be able, I think at a minimum, we all know we want to be able to have a virtual option of some sort after July 25th. Please, if any of you disagree with that, let me know, but I think we're all in agreement on that. And then, hopefully we can work with, closely with the borough president's office to try to implement some of the very salient comments that you guys have all made tonight. Does that seem okay for everyone? Yeah.
And just one caution, just one caution, and that we keep it light. I don't want to get into the details too much of making this correction. Let's keep it light. Let's keep the light means flexibility and adaptation. If we burden it with these details and all of that, that makes it very difficult to. So that's my one caution. That we keep it. Please keep it light, which makes it accessible. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks everyone. If everyone's okay with this, I appreciate everyone's time tonight. We called this meeting. Hopefully we'll be done within an hour. But we really just want this to be something where CB7 can, have a say in this. We've been working hard and had some great conversations as a task force, and it would be nice to see hopefully some of those things implemented. I think sort of a less is more. I don't want to say kicking the can down the road, but with some tweaks that are very general, hopefully that will be something that we can submit to the full board for a vote on Thursday. And Max and I and anyone else who wants to between now and then, we'll send something around so you guys can look at it, make sure it reflects this conversation. We're recording the meeting so anyone can take a look back if we have included or not included anything that you thought was important. And then we have a brief discussion on Thursday night and do a vote. But Thursday night is not intended to be anything more than a conversation on this one item. So we don't want to tie you up anymore in July, especially since our bylaws were approved and we're not supposed to be meeting in July unless there's something extraordinary. So really appreciate all of your time. Feel free to contact me, Max, Stephen, if you,
Elizabeth?
Anyone else from the task force. Yeah.
Sorry, shouldn't we take a vote though? I mean,
I guess we do. I mean, yes. I mean, I guess, are we?
We should probably take a vote. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So Max, I guess I can be the secretary for the meeting too, but for members of the task force, and I think we have a quorum from the members of the task force who are here.
Do have a quorum, yeah.
Yeah. So all those in favor of the tweaked version of this that we're going to advance to the full board meeting, raise your hands. Oh, I'm going to raise my hand. Can I I guess I can raise my hand, right?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Robert, that is a hand raised, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you, Mark, for the parliamentary clarification.
Okay.
Okay, I'm lowering my hand.
Elizabeth, why are we meeting early if we're voting on this now?
Where are we meeting?
Are we meeting before the the full board meeting?
No, we're gonna. This is being voted on now, and then there's going to be a full board meeting that's scheduled for Thursday at 5:30 p.m.
5:30 is the full board. Okay.
Yeah.
And for clarification, that full board meeting is only for this topic.
Yes.
That is correct. Yeah.
God willing. Okay, so are there any, I guess, do we need to see if there's anyone opposed? I removed my hand, but if there's anyone opposed.
If any, yeah, raise your hand if you're opposed.
Or abstaining for cause. Okay, awesome. Okay, so we have a plan. I think we'll get this ready for Thursday night. I think it'll be a good discussion. We'll try to moderate it.
We take a vote at the
non-committee, yeah.
Oh, sorry, the non-task force. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Non-task force members, please raise your hand if you support what we're planning to do. I think that's just Doug. I consider Doug a member of the task force, even though I know he's
No,
not.
actually, no, there's 5.
Yeah,
hands
I
up.
have 5.
There are 5 others. Okay. Oh, Seema,
Doug,
Beverly.
Seema,
Sorry. I
Sonia.
didn't- Sorry, guys. Excellent. Mostly ladies. Sorry, all of you. Okay. So 5 yes. Anyone opposed or abstaining for cause?
Gotta lower those hands.
All right. So I think we have a pretty good group. I think if I read it correctly, what is it? Max 8 to 0 to 0 0?
Yes, it's correct.
And 5 to 0 or 8 to yes. And 5 to 0 to 0. Yeah, perfect.
And I can
Okay.
double check later, but I think that's it.
So we had 13 board members. Thank you to the 13 members who gave up their July holiday to join this meeting. Much appreciated. Your comments will be incorporated into this. We especially want you involved as we figure this out as we head into the fall. We know things are going to change, but at a minimum, we want virtual meetings, to happen in perpetuity for board members. And we'll figure out how and why, thanks to all of your guidance. So thanks, everyone. Have a great evening. Go enjoy
Thank
Manhattan.
you. Good night.
Nice.
It's an hour away, so get out to